A reading from the Gospel according to John. Jesus appears to his disciples. On the evening of that first day of the week, when the disciples were together, with the doors locked for fear of the Jewish leaders, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." After he said this, he showed them his hands and side. The disciples were overjoyed when they saw the Lord. Again Jesus said, "Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, I am sending you." And with that he breathed on them and said, "Receive the Holy Spirit. If you forgive anyone's sins, their sins are forgiven. If you do not forgive them, they are not forgiven." Now Thomas, also known as Didymus, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We have seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands, and put my finger where the nails were, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." A week later his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe." Thomas said to him, "My Lord and my God." Then Jesus told him, "Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in this book. But these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name.
Welcome. In this explainer, we're going to unlock a really powerful idea from the Gospels that I think speaks directly to the pressures we all feel in our modern lives. We're going beyond the locked doors.
Okay, let's just dive right in. I want you to think for a second. When was the last time, just this week, that your heart felt, locked? Shut down, closed off, maybe a little afraid to let anyone in? Go ahead, just hold that thought for a moment.
Because that feeling, right, that sense of being behind a locked door, that's exactly what we're going to explore today. It's something we all go through. And believe it or not, it has some really deep spiritual roots.
I mean, look at this. This gets right to the heart of what our modern locked doors feel like. This isn't some ancient problem. This is our stuff. That feeling of being totally overwhelmed by bills, or being stung by a misunderstanding with someone you love, or just being completely, utterly sunk by exhaustion. In those moments, what's our first instinct? It's to lock down, right? To protect ourselves. And this quote just brilliantly illustrates that we are not alone in this feeling, not by a long shot. 2,000 years ago, the disciples were doing the exact same thing. I mean, their leader had just been executed. Their whole world was turned upside down, and they were terrified. So what did they do? They locked the doors. Sound familiar at all?
So, let's get into the story. Picture this. The disciples are all huddled in that locked room, just steeped in fear. They probably think they have to figure it all out on their own before they can even think about facing the world again. But then, a visitor arrives.
And I want you to notice how he arrives. The text doesn't say he knocked. It doesn't say he rattled the doorknob or waited for someone to let him in. He just came and stood in their midst. He completely bypassed the locks.
And his very first words, they're not a lecture for their fear, not a demand for them to be stronger. His first words are a gift. He just says, "Peace be with you." He brings the one thing they absolutely do not have inside that locked room.
And this, right here, is such a crucial point for all of us. It's not about us having to achieve perfection first. Jesus doesn't need a spotless house or a perfect family or a fearless heart to show up. He enters into the reality of our lives. He meets us right in the middle of our mess, right there with us behind our locked doors.
So this leads us to what is maybe the most transformative idea in this entire reading. It's a complete reframing of how we look at our own struggles. It's this idea that our wounds can actually become windows.
Just look at this comparison for a second. From our point of view, our wounds, our mistakes, our weaknesses, our vulnerabilities, they feel like failures, things we need to hide from everybody. But from God's perspective, those exact same wounds are the openings, the windows, through which His mercy can just pour right in.
I mean, think about it. When doubting Thomas needed proof, what did Jesus show him? He didn't show him His power or His glory. He showed him His wounds. He literally presented His scars as the ultimate evidence of who He was and of His incredible love. He wasn't ashamed of them at all. They were His credentials.
This completely redefines what vulnerability means, especially within our own families. It's not a weakness to admit you're struggling. No, in the light of faith, that vulnerability is the very opening that allows God's mercy to come in and heal not just you, but your relationships too.
Okay, so how do we take this really profound idea and make it real in our day-to-day lives? Well, that brings us to a simple, practical exercise that we're calling the Mercy Challenge.
You can do this right at home, in what the faith calls the domestic church, which is really just the church of your own family. It only takes a minute, but I promise you, it can shift the entire atmosphere from one of locked doors to one of open windows.
Here are the steps, and they're super simple. First, if you're with your spouse or a family member, just hold hands. Second, look at an image of the divine mercy. You can just pull one up on your phone. Third, together, say this simple but powerful prayer: Jesus, I trust in you. And finally, and this is the big one, specifically name and invite him into the locked room of your biggest worry this week. Just acknowledge the fear and ask for his peace.
Because, the real work of faith doesn't just happen by watching an explainer like this. It happens when you take these ideas and you actually live them out. Your journey of turning wounds into windows, that continues at home.
So, let's end with that central prayer. It's a surrender, it's an act of faith, and it's an invitation for peace to come beyond our locked doors. So, what's the one locked door you can invite him into tonight? Jesus, I trust in you.